So we are fast approaching Passover, what's known as Pesach, and an unleavened bread. And so I thought it was time for another festival edition video. And so I just was thinking for a long time, like, how did I want to do the video that would discuss Pesach and Passover and the Seder meal, unleavened bread? How is it that I wanted to go about that? And it's a really complex issue to figure out how to deal with and how to talk about. And then I got a few messages that were very similar from a few different friends that I know, and I got one email in particular that I thought, that's going to be very helpful. That's going to help me. I had an acquaintance of mine send me an email, and part of it read like this. She's reflecting on whether or not she should lead. There's 20 or 30 people that she's considering, leading in a Seder meal, a Passover Seder meal, as Jesus followers. And so she says, basically, I'm curious if that is appropriate for us to do. Listen to this. I want us to be culturally mindful, so I guess before I even ask what we should do, I'd like to know your thoughts on if we should do it when none of us have participated in one before, and as far as I understand it, everybody in the group is Gentiles, Gentile Christians. And so, and again, it's not my goal to do another video on appropriation and supercessionism. I'm not just trying to come back and just beat this drum over and over again. I promise every holiday video won't be like this, and yet this one is very, very important for many reasons. And I wanted to start my series with that. I mean, just 2 or 3 videos ago in this festival series, I started with thoughts on appropriation and supersessionism. I'll be linking that in the description so you can go back and watch that. I don't want to have to rehash those details. But I wanted to start there because I don't want this series to be misconstrued or misunderstood as kind of like a how-to YouTube series from Marty about how you too can observe Jewish festivals in your home. That's not what I'm trying to do here at all. Now, some of you may do that, and I understand that. I understand that there will be different people that are coming from different messianic perspectives or the Hebrew roots movement, and I've tried to distinguish myself from those things. That's not exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing something else with Bema in general, let alone this series. But my teaching, my ministry is not that. A lot of people think it is. A lot of people think they understand what I'm doing, and a lot of times they get me pegged incorrectly. But it's also okay that there will be people that see this differently. I know that there are some of you watching this series that you come from communities, you come from assemblies, you come from messianic congregations that do observe the festivals. You do think this is the right thing to do. Why in the world is Marty suggesting you wouldn't? I understand that. And the beautiful thing about our world, the beautiful thing about studying the scriptures, the beautiful thing about following Jesus is that you get to disagree with me, and you don't have to try to convince me. My life, my understanding, my theology is built upon a lot of study, a lot of research, a lot of conviction, and a perspective that's mine, along with many others, but it's mine. And you have yours, and that's the beautiful thing. So you get to do that. But the thing that is important to me, and as Jesus followers should always be the case, I think is the one thing we shouldn't be arguing about is whether or not we should be respectful and what my friend here says, culturally mindful, like an awareness of what we should or shouldn't do in order to be appropriate and culturally mindful, to be aware of appropriation, to be aware of the dangers of supersessionism. Listen, those ideas have been the root of serious anti-Semitism. Like, appropriation and supersessionism can spring out of anti-Semitism. It can also lead to anti-Semitism. Like, disturbing, dark things have been done because these things are done poorly. Now, a lot of those things are done unintentionally, just kind of in ignorance, which is why it's so important to bring, like, critical thinking and some gravity to what we're talking about here. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm spending all this time talking about this. It has become very trendy. I mean, I can remember when I was much younger, maybe even in high school or college. When I was in high school, I can remember Jews for Jesus coming to our church and doing a Passover Seder presentation. And those kind of picked up in popularity, and then more and more people, especially as churches and pastors and Christian theologians in general, just became more and more aware of the Jewish roots of our faith. It became more and more popular for people to start throwing their own Passover Seder meals. We did it at all the churches I've ever been a part of. So that's not a critique. That's something that I was a part of. And it became very trendy. And it became very... And the problem is that it also was being done very poorly. And so I want to kind of like walk through my email response to this friend of mine for our video, and then I'll have some thoughts. I'll reflect on unleavened bread, and then we'll call it a day. But first of all, I really respected, and I respect anybody that has enough awareness to even ask this question. Like, I think Christians sometimes are very un-Christ-like in that we're so just self-absorbed. Like we just want to do our own thing, and who cares how anybody else feels? And it's my world, and how dare you tell me anything? And that's so un-Jesus. That's so not what Jesus is doing. So any Christian that has the awareness of others, like we've had the fortunate, unfortunate at times, privilege of being able to assume that we're the default for the last 1,600, 1,800 years. And any time a Christian has the awareness in our Western part, particularly America, our Western part of the world, to kind of remember that there are others around us, and the way that we behave and the way that we act tells the world something about who our God is. I'm always impressed by that. That's a huge first step. Like Philippians chapter 2. Yes. So I love that. So here are some things I said. I said, first of all, this has been done so poorly by so much of Christianity. There's so much cheapening of the Jewish faith and how we approach it. The appropriation is rampant, and supercessionist theology is even worse. So it's no surprise that Orthodox Judaism has been so deeply offended by the growing trend of Christian Seders. And it's deeply offensive to Jewish to just watch Christians like get together and promote it and throw it on a website and come do a Passover Seder meal in the name of Jesus. It would be like somebody taking the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper, communion, and doing it. The Jewish person says, "My goodness, what are you doing to something so holy and sacred and central to my faith?" Having said that, there's also an element to understanding the Jewish roots of our Jewish Rabbi Messiah and having a growing understanding of what he was and what he is teaching for us as his followers. I just don't think you can escape that. So I made some changes over the last few years as I kept listening to Jewish friends, leaders, and thinkers about this situation. I've been evolving. I've been changing the way I approach Christian Seders and the Passover. I think we should engage it as an educational, even if it is experiential. Like, I don't think it just has to be like as an observer. I think we can even experience the Seder on some level, but it needs to be an educational exercise. Education, it's about learning. We are wanting to learn about the Jewish Seder context of Jesus' last moments with his disciples and what he was trying to teach them. And I do not believe at this point in my evolution we should feel bad about learning about this, about educating ourselves. And part of learning can be informational, learning can be visual, learning can be experiential. And what an opportunity to learn experientially. But it needs to be a learning exercise. So here's some more reflections. We should not, as Gentile Christians in particular, Gentile Christians should not view themselves as immersed participants in the Passover Seder. It's not our meal, and the practice is not a Christian one. We should not appropriate and play Passover. Play Passover. When possible, I think this should be informed by Jewish teachers and led by Jews. We should remember that the Passover of Jesus, this is important too, we should remember that the Passover of Jesus was significantly different. Listen, it was significantly different than the Passover of today, and the details that existed in Second Temple Judaism are wildly debated about what was actually present in Jesus' Passover. That's part of what I do when I do Seder meals, and always have for years. We should be mindful of quickly talking about how the Passover foreshadowed Jesus, as that's very supersessionist. Like I try to strip most of that away. Like I have a few passing observations about the Passover Seder in light of Jesus, but I try to strip away all of this foreshadowing. Well, this part of the Passover foreshadows Jesus, and this part of the Passover foreshadows Jesus, and this part of the Passover foreshadows Jesus. Listen, the Passover was not just an exercise in foreshadowing Jesus. The Passover was a meal around which Jews for centuries, millennia, found their identity. It was central to their relationship with God and who they were as a people. And it's this people that Jesus comes out of. Jesus isn't just showing up to replace this. That's what supersessionist theology is. We need to get rid of that. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's not it. We should honor the Judaism that gave us these things and simultaneously realize that the Judaism of Jesus is not the Judaism of today. Handling those two things is very tricky, complicated, and messy. The Judaism of Jesus is Second Temple Judaism. It's a Judaism of history way back there. Judaism today is a Judaism that continued to evolve on a different track than Jesus Judaism, than Christian Judaism, than Messianic Judaism. These are two different experiences that evolved according to different parameters and faith experiences and expressions. So if you just look at Orthodox Jews today, their Judaism is not the same Judaism of Jesus, which is somehow locked in a historical vacuum for us as an educational exercise. Do you see how complicated this can be? Absolutely. Absolutely. We should be very mindful. If this is complicated, what should it do? It should provoke in us respect. It should provoke in us curiosity. It should provoke in us like an open-handed, this should be easy to love other people with this. Like the last thing we should be is like closed down, I own this, I have all the answers. This is really messy. We should be mindful of how our actions are perceived by others. As far as it depends on us, we should strive to live at peace with everyone. Our Jesus faith should very rarely be offensive to others in the way that we pursue its substance. Like, of course, some of the substance may be offensive to folks. There are going to be things that people might not necessarily agree with. But the way that we pursue it, the posture we have, that should hardly ever be offensive to other people. That should smell and look like Jesus. None of this is easy. So we should cut ourselves a ton of grace, I do believe that, and try to love everyone as best as we can. We are also trying to understand Jesus as best we can. So we should try to make him smile, Jesus smile. We should try to make Jesus smile in whatever we do and however we do it. So here's just some passing resources that I put in this email that I'll also link in the description of the video below. First of all, there's the 2 or 3 festival videos ago, I talked about Purim Part 1, and I did a whole video about appropriation and supersessionism, so I'll link that video there. If anybody did want to watch a full video of a Seder that I did years ago, just to be able to watch it as an educational exercise. We did record it, and we do currently have it behind a resource paywall. It is not at all my intent to try to make money off the Seder meal. It's actually my intent to make it a little bit more sacred, a little bit more, like if that's something a resource, an educational resource you really want to get your hands on, we have that available. You can purchase that Seder meal. You can watch it. We put it up years ago, so I hope the links all still work. You can get a hold of me if they don't work, but the links you should when you pay it's a donation based resource. Pay whatever you want. We have an explanation of that on the website. But then when you get it on your receipt letter, you'll see we have a suggested donation. But when you pay whatever you want and you get that receipt letter, it'll have the code for the video in it. So it should be really easy to use. We ask you to not share that code unless you've, with just your family and people in your household, for those that have paid for it. But we did that in order to make it a little bit less accessible on purpose. We didn't want it to just be flung around and shared by everyone publicly. It's not our intent to make money. That's why we're not actually selling it. It's you get to choose your donation for that. So anyway, that link for that video will be in the description of this video as well. So you're welcome to swing over there and get that. And again, I just super admire this friend of mine who had the awareness, the self-awareness to think critically and to ask those questions. So I love that. So that's my thoughts on Passover. And feel free to, ask your questions or throw things in the comments or anything like that. After Passover leads right into unleavened bread, which is the next 7 days following Passover. You essentially continue. As you get into Passover, you have engaged in what's called Bedikat Chametz, which is the removal of leaven. You've gotten all the leaven out of your house. So you've engaged in that, and that whole removal of leaven just continues. So for the next week after Pesach, you continue to not eat leaven, to not eat yeast, and the only bread you have is unleavened matzah. It's the festival of matzah, and it's a wonderful time and always great. It'll often on the Christian calendar overlap with Resurrection Day at times, which is the one day of the festival of unleavened bread that we make an exception, because the resurrection, in my theological conviction, is the most unbelievable, the greatest truth of human history. The resurrection gets to trump everything. And so we celebrate and we pull out all the stops for that. Just to have just an amazing, great time and celebrate the fact that the tomb is empty. But unleavened bread, for that week, we always, we keep all the leaven out of the house. We eat matzah bread. As far as the bread that we would eat, that's what we eat. And we alter our diet in that way. And it's always great. Now, there's a huge historical academic debate between the relationship between Pesach, Passover, and unleavened bread. And their relationship kind of as one experience. Was there Pesach and unleavened bread? Was there unleavened bread and then Pesach? Was there Pesach and then unleavened bread? There's a huge historical, what's the relationship between Pesach, unleavened bread, and first fruits? There's all kinds of relationships going on here. So this video will kind of cover the whole Pesach unleavened bread reflection for me and our family, which means the next video we should have coming up will be here in next 7 weeks, Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks. So it's those 7 weeks that follow. Those 50 days later, you have what some people call Pentecost, or the Festival of Weeks, Shavuot. That will be our next reflection. So I look forward to talking more about that. I promise it won't be just more reflection on supercessionism and appropriation, but thank you for entertaining that. It's an important conversation for us to have when we think about particularly Passover. If you really want good reflections on Passover itself, feel free to go find that video. Send in whatever donation you'd like, and you can acquire that video, and you can appreciate just learning learning from the experience in that regard. So thanks for humoring my own reflection. I look forward to the next time.